do want to make sure that you are very intentional about your recruiting strategy. You want to make sure that when you are reviewing candidates and their applications, that you are very clear of what the job needs and that you're selecting to interview candidates that you truly feel are going to be a good fit for the company at first glance. Making sure you don't skip steps when it comes to the interview process and the reference checks. I think it's somewhere that it's easy to do because we hire out of urgency, and I encourage you to slow down and take your time so that you do choose the right candidate that will be a long-term employee, because you don't want to find yourself back here in 3 to 6 months looking to fill the same position.
Welcome along to the ABC Financial Intensive Series. I'm your host, Chantal Broderick. Our intensive shows are designed specifically to be like a short course where you'll learn practical steps throughout the 60-minute episode. Our expert guest for this show is Meredith DePersia, and our focus topic is the first 90 days, onboarding a new employee. Let me start by telling you a little bit about our expert guest. Meredith is the Vice President of Human Resources for Active Wellness, LLC. She leads a passionate team of HR professionals who are responsible for employee relations, benefits, recruitment, and compliance. Prior to Active, she was the Vice President of Commercial Clubs at Club One, serving in leadership roles such as General Manager, Regional Manager, and Director of Operations throughout her 11-year tenure. She has been a featured speaker on employee management for IHRSA and a resource for industry publication articles such as Club Solutions Magazine and Club Business International. This episode of the show truly is one of the most comprehensive onboarding guides that you will ever find. During the interview, we discuss in part 1 the pre-hire process, which includes recruitment, interviewing, reference and background checks. Then in part 2, we chat about hiring the employee, so extending offer letters and compensation plans and key components to include on each, presenting employee handbooks at the time of hire, scheduling the employee for training. Then in part 3, we chat about the employee's first day, which includes training checklists, pre-first day tasks to set the new employee for success, tools to present on the first day, and a new employee orientation content. Then in part 4, we chat about new employee training. In this section, we discuss utilization of culture carriers, weekly meetings, check-ins, ongoing support, and the 90-day review. Now, please keep in mind there is a lot of information coming up in this episode, so I've got a couple of little tips for you today. Number 1, grab something you can write notes on. Pen, paper, phone, laptop, whatever tickles your fancy, just go and get something and get prepared. Number 2, once you've listened to the full show, then go to fitnessbusinesspodcast.com and download the ebook. You can then work your way through the information there, or you can print off the PDF and use it with your team. Last but not least, don't forget that we've broken the show into 4 parts, which means you can either listen to all of it in one go, or you can stop at the end of each chapter. The choice is completely up to you. Before we get stuck into the show, I first want to say a huge thank you to our podcast partner, ABC Financial. To learn why top health and fitness facilities use ABC Financial to simplify their gym management and increase profitability, head to www.abcfinancial.com. Enjoy this special interview with our guest, Meredith DePersia. Meredith, welcome along. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So we're talking about the first 90 days, onboarding a new employee. And part 1 of our conversation is all around the pre-hire process. But before we even chat about onboarding a new employee, it's of course essential that we get the candidate selection right. Anything from interviewing to background checks, there are multiple components within that process. So can you step us through the essential steps of candidate selection?
Absolutely. Successful candidate selection always begins with a strong recruiting strategy. So I recommend organizations have an online career portal to manage all incoming applications. The portal should list all of your open positions so applicants know what jobs you're looking to fill at any given time. So a best practice that we use at Active would be that each job posting mirrors the job description of the role so that applicants know exactly what will be expected of them before they apply. So for example, if we're hiring a personal trainer, the job description details functions that are training and programming related, but it also details functions that are related to sales, marketing, operations, and safety. So being a successful personal trainer at Active requires skills in all of these areas, not just training and programming. So we want to be very clear from the beginning on what's expected from the person who fills the role. This not only helps us weed out applicants that would not be a good fit for the position, it helps in setting clear expectations after the candidate is hired. So once you have the job posting set up, you need to drive applicants to your career portal. I recommend using both paid and unpaid job boards. Indeed and LinkedIn, those are great for finding management level applicants. Industry associations such as IDEA, NASM, and IHRSA, they reach a variety of applicants, but what's great about these platforms is that they help drive in applicants who are specifically looking to work in the fitness industry. Handshake, that's a great way to target college students to fill your entry-level positions. Social media platforms like Instagram and Facebook are proving to be a great way to drive in passive job searchers who may not even realize you're hiring or that they would want to work for you. And Craigslist. It's a great way to drive in frontline employees and is still a popular search engine for entry-level as well as experienced applicants. Now, job boards that feed the most applicants are typically not free. So some boards have flat fees, some have variable fees depending on how high up you want the requisition to be featured in a search. So you do want to have a thoughtful plan on which platforms you want to use for which positions and how much you want to spend to have your job requisition be viewed by the most applicants.
Okay, Meredith, so now that you have acquired candidates for a position, what's the next step?
Right. So the next step is interviewing. This is a critical piece of the hiring puzzle. It's one of the areas that managers must slow down and be thorough with. At Active, we have a structured interview process with documents and resources for managers to use. This helps define our expectations for the hiring managers. It also reduces inconsistency in our hiring practices and ensures that candidates are treated fairly throughout the process. So these resources include guidelines that walk managers through the active hiring practice, and also questionnaires. These questionnaires are to be used as guides during the interview process. Some questionnaires are general and applied to all applicants, and some are position-specific questionnaires, so you can really dig into each individual role and ask questions that are specific to that. These resources help guide the interview, and it helps the manager identify their top-tier candidates quickly and effectively and consistently. We do make sure that managers know that they have to conduct an initial phone screen. This is always required before a live interview takes place. So what this does is this gives the hiring manager an initial impression of the candidate and helps determine whether or not a formal interview is going to be the next step or not. Candidates can look great on paper. They put down exactly what they want us to see. But hearing them on the phone can be very informative. If the phone screen doesn't go well, the process ends there. If it does go well, the applicant will move on to the live interview. At Active, a minimum of 3 interviews are required so that the hiring decision is never made in a vacuum. So multiple interviewers helps eliminate biases, and it also allows for group discussion on whether a candidate would be a good fit. It also increases a candidate's exposure to the company and the club culture. And this will help the candidate decide for themselves if Active is a company that they see themselves being a part of. So once you've completed your interviews and you've decided on your top candidate, the next key step is the reference check. This is a step that cannot be overlooked. Hiring managers get really frustrated with reference checks, and they want to move forward with candidates before this step is completed, usually due to an urgency to fill the position. So I hear all too often candidates are providing references that don't return the reference calls or the emails, or the references are all personal references rather than professional references. Managers should really view all of this as red flags. At Active, we do not hire candidates that cannot provide relevant work-related references that will be responsive to the hiring manager. So if you are getting references as a hiring manager and you are unable to contact these references and get a call back and actually speak speak live with them and be able to know that they are professional references, you need to go back to that candidate and tell them that they have to provide quality references that will call us back, or they will not move forward in the process. So this will either result in the receipt of quality references or the candidate will be excluded, and both are good options.
Meredith, I feel like sometimes there are candidates that come across really well during an interview process, but then they're quite different when you end up employing them. In your experience, do you have any alternative or different or unique ways to interview someone to ensure that you get the real person?
Well, it's really hard to know anyone in 30 to 60 minutes. The interview questions must really be intentional, and you have to be very structured and know what you're asking. Employees are going to have all kinds of answers to your questions that are going to tell you exactly what you want to hear. The key is to having situational and behavioral interviewing techniques as part of your toolkit, because those are the best ways to get the real person in this very short amount of time. So answers to situational interview questions will give you a good idea of what someone would do in a hypothetical situation that could actually happen at your club. So you want the situation that you present to be realistic, but you don't want it to be predictable, so you don't get a canned answer. Answers to behavioral questions will tell you what the candidate has done in the past, what their behaviors were, which is a great way to determine what they will do in the future. So most people cannot hide who they are when answering these questions because their answers are actually reasonable to them. They see their behavior and their decisions as appropriate. If a candidate gives you an answer that you feel demonstrates questionable integrity, that will tell you a lot about the decisions the person would make as an employee of yours. So you really want to listen to the answers and determine whether or not they are in alignment with the company values before determining if the person would be a good fit or not.
Okay, Meredith, so that is our part one, the pre-hire process. So let's move now on to part two, which is the hiring of employees. Can you start off by giving us just a quick overview of what documentation should be included when hiring a new employee?
Yes, there are 3 important document types that you need to include when you are making an offer to a candidate. The first is the offer letter, which includes the base rate of pay. Then you have your supplemental compensation plans. And these are compensation plans that will detail the supplemental compensation such as piece rate, commissions, bonus pay, anything outside of the base rate of pay will be on these plans. You might need more than one. We will walk through the reasons for that. And then the last thing is the employee handbook. A copy of that needs to be sent along with the offer letter and all the compensation plans that are applicable.
Excellent. So now that we've got that overview, let's dive into some detail around the offer letter. Tell us what we need to include in that.
The offer letter is a master employment agreement. So it's an official agreement between the employee and an employer. So it has to be very carefully written. Active's offer letter, I'll walk through the key parts of it. The employment start date is incredibly important. So this isn't the date that they receive the offer letter. It's the date that they expect to start work. You have the job title, the department they're going to work in, and their base rate of pay, which is their guaranteed rate of pay. This is separate from piece rate pay, commission pay, bonus pay. This is salary. This is hourly pay for administrative work, floor hours. It is simply the base rate of pay. You will also have who the employee reports to, so they know who their supervisor is. You want to reference supplemental compensation plans that the employee qualifies for so that it's noted on the offer letter that there is an additional compensation plan and additional way that the employee will be compensated. You want to have the pay dates on there so it's very clear when they get paid. Making sure also to have the employment status. It needs to say whether the employee is full-time or part-time, exempt or not exempt. And we always recommend having the number of hours a week the employee is scheduled to be working. We also want to include important benefit and employee obligations. This includes worker compensation policy information, mandatory sick leave benefits if it's applicable, and a statement about being bound to the terms of the employee handbook. We also include a statement that employment is contingent on successfully passing a background check. That absolutely must be on this document. You can put an offer letter out, they sign it, you run a background check, and if it doesn't come back and meets the standards for your organization, that is your ticket out of that agreement. When you also want to have when the offer expires. 5 business days is standard for someone to consider an offer. We always include our employer at-will statement. We have this statement on every single employment agreement and in our handbook. Cannot stress enough the importance of that. And then finally, there's an area for the candidate to sign and send back, as well as an area for the active representative to sign and send them a copy. So if the new hire's compensation includes a piece rate, commission, or bonus earnings, now we're going to talk about the supplemental compensation plan that's referenced on that offer letter. This is also presented and signed at the same time as the offer letter. So active compensation plans include key information such as the start date of the earning eligibility. Sometimes we hire an employee who is going to start off in training and won't become eligible for the additional supplemental compensation till a later date. So we want to make sure that that date is accurate of when they become eligible for it. We have the employer at-will statement. We also define the supplemental compensation structure. So the piece rate for service employees and group exercise instructors, commission for sales, and or bonus compensation, which is typically for management candidates. We also reference the base rate of pay and direct them to the master employment agreement to review that. And then we define the difference in the work for each type of compensation. For example, a group exercise instructor will earn a specific rate of pay for work done within an hour teaching a class. They will also earn administrative pay. So we will detail out what qualifies for administrative pay so that it's very clear to that group X instructor how they're paid and what they're paid and what work they're paid for. We will also define the requirements to earn the piece rate, commission, and or the bonus. We will define what would cause these wages to not be earned. That could be the money for the services wasn't collected, the services weren't redeemed, they were serviced by another employee. All of this needs to be outlined on the compensation plan, so it's very clear how compensation is earned for these employees in these specific roles. You also want to outline when the wages will be paid. We include a section reiterating our non-solicitation policy. It's a great opportunity to put that back in the front with your service employees, and a signature area for both parties to sign. So the goals with these documents is to clearly define for the employee how they'll be paid, when they'll be paid, what is required to be paid, to outline key policies that are related to their hiring and compensation, and to reiterate that their employment is at will. So at Active, we require a separate plan for each role. So what this means is that if I hire a group exercise instructor who also personal trains, that candidate is going to receive an offer letter, a personal training compensation plan, and a group instructional employee compensation plan, a total of 3 compensation agreements, because they are paid differently and there are different requirements for all those different pieces. Offer letters and compensation plans can be delivered via email. I always recommend making them a PDF before you send those off. And then you want to attach a copy of the employee handbook. The reason we attach the handbook is because we want the candidate to review our company policies before agreeing to become an employee. On the offer letter, it states that by signing, they are agreeing. If they have not read it, then we can't be sure that they know what they're agreeing to. So you want to make sure you send that over. I do want to say that I highly recommend companies have an employment attorney review the offer letter and compensation plan verbiage, as these can be used against employers if they are not properly worded. So you want to make sure that you have some legal eyes on these to make sure that the verbiage is correct, that you aren't violating any employee rights, and that the terms of the agreement for the compensation is very clear to the employee.
Meredith, that was an incredibly comprehensive overview. Thank you very much for talking us through that. Now, what I'd love to do is let's bring all of that into a summary for all of our listeners today. So can you just take us through a quick checklist of the documents that we need to give a new employee?
So when you are extending an offer, you are going to want to send an offer letter, which is a master employment agreement with their base rate of pay. You are also going to want to include supplemental compensation plans for any additional supplemental compensation. That would be piece rate pay, commission pay, and bonus pay. And then you want to make sure that you send the employee handbook. This should be a full package. A special note is to make sure that when you complete a compensation plan, you are having a separate one completed for every role that has a different compensation. So there could be multiple plans for one employee, and you want to make sure that they have all of them.
Okay, Meredith, so can you explain to us what is that next step once we receive the signed documentation back?
So once you receive back the signed offer letter and any supplemental compensation plans, the criminal background check is initiated. I recommend using a third-party vendor for this, as there are really strict guidelines and regulations that need to be followed in regards to consent, reporting, and record keeping. Once that check is complete, best case scenario, the check comes back clear. But if not, you should have a written adjudication process in place. So this process helps employers be consistent in deciding whether to approve or deny employment based on the results of the check. Every background check that does not come back clear should be reviewed individually with a decision made thoughtfully. So I advise that human resources should really be handling these checks and all conversations with the candidate regarding the results, because keeping this information as confidential is essential. You do not want to have any awkwardness between the hiring manager and that employee if you do end up hiring that employee, with that employee feeling uncomfortable that the hiring manager knows too much personal information about them. So you really want to hand that off to somebody else who's more qualified and separated from that piece of the hiring process. Once the background check is completed and the hiring moves forward, then you start the pre-onboarding process. At Active, we use 2 new hire checklists. We have one for non-supervisor roles and we have one for supervisor roles. So all pre-training tasks are to be completed before the new employee's first day. So these tasks include setting up access to all the systems the employee will use on the job. So these could be HR related, sales, payroll, IT. It all depends on the role and what sort of systems they need to have access to be successful in their jobs. You also want to make sure you're ordering their name tags, their uniforms, their business cards, everything they need to have it on site and ready for the employee on day one. And then I always think that having some sort of company branded swag available and there as a welcome gift, it communicates that you're happy that the employee chose your organization. The first days are really overwhelming for employees. They're going to be really stressed out. So this is a really nice touch to ensure a great experience. All employees like to walk out with something, a t-shirt, a water bottle, something that says, I'm now a part of this company, that's personal for them to use as not necessarily something they would use on the job.
I love that little touch at the end there, Meredith, the idea of just giving them something that makes them immediately feel part of the team. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for giving us such a comprehensive overview on what we need to do when it comes to hiring our new employees. Now, you just touched on then a new employee's first day, which is exactly where we're about to head for part 3 of today's interview. Day one for a new employee usually includes a lot of learning and a lot of new information. So can you walk us through what a first day should actually look like so it's not overwhelming and so that our new employee has a great experience in their new role?
Well, I wish I could say that there's a way to make it not overwhelming, but unfortunately, it's always overwhelming. The employee is nervous. As an organization, we have one shot to make a good impression on their first day, and it's so imperative that we do. So it's overwhelming for everybody involved. We can't cut back on certain things that we have to do on that first day in order to make it less overwhelming. You just kind of have to power through with the best positive attitude and making the new employee feel as comfortable as possible. I do find that communicating what to expect on the first day is a really great way to reduce the new employee's anxiety before they come in. So they know what they're doing that first day and feel a little bit more in control, have an understanding of what they're going to be walking into. So when you schedule a new employee's first day, you want to give them a rundown of how the day is going to look, and then you want to make sure you stick to it, because that is what they're working off of. That is how they're staying calm, that expectation and knowing what's coming next. So on the first day, you want to start off by knocking out all the necessary paperwork required for them to actually begin work. So this involves the I-9 verification documents. Those have to be checked off before any work is done, possibly blank check for direct deposit, and copies of professional credentials if these were not always provided. This is essential. This is the time to tell new employees to bring in all their documents. So you want to make sure you've prepped them in advance so that they don't come without it. If they don't bring their I-9 verification, you can't move forward with the first day. So make sure you're communicating what is needed. Then you want to give out their name tags, their business cards, uniforms, anything they're going to need to start them off immediately. You want to show them their new work area so that they get comfortable and can envision themselves there as they go through training. Make sure they have the welcome gift. That's always a great kind of icebreaker to calm them down and make them feel really good and happy. And then you want to walk the new employee through the club. This is where they're introduced to all the employees working that day. They become familiar with the layout of the club. It helps reduce those first days, I don't know anyone, or I don't know where I'm going feelings. By immediately making contact with coworkers, they will feel more comfortable as they move around the club in the coming days. Then the actual training begins. There is training on day one. So the first day is so important in setting the stage for the new employee and integrating them into the culture of the company. So Active's new employees start their training with a new employee orientation video. The video introduces the new employee to the structure of the company, the leadership team members, key employment-related policies from the handbooks. We cover pay dates and pay practices, meal periods and rest break policies, other benefits and resources. We're a California primarily based company, so the more information, the better. And then before the employee views the orientation video, they're given a paper and a pencil so that they can write down any questions that come up for them during the viewing. So the manager can immediately come and sit down with them and walk through their questions and close any loops before moving on to the next step of training. This way the questions are answered and they can move on to the next thing. A lot of people think that having a new employee orientation video requires a lot of effort to create. It doesn't. If you can make it through iMovie. There's so many different creative ways that you can do something that can wow the employee that doesn't cost a lot of money, but gives them a complete introduction into the organization and the culture and make them feel a more part of things. So it's something that is incredibly essential, and I encourage club managers to have something like this for their employees. So the next step after they've gone through the new employee video is you're going to review the new employee training checklist. So again, this is a detailed list of all the required training tasks. This checklist includes all the pre-first day tasks. So the manager is always working off the same document. Okay. So this clearly communicates the information that the new employee is expected to know when they finish their training. And it ensures that all training has been completed at the end of the training period. You should have tailored the checklist in advance to fit the role. So not every task is applicable to every role. We have one standard non-supervisor and one standard supervisor checklist, but that can be adjusted. For example, a group exercise instructor may not need training on the member management system, and a sales representative may not need to be trained on service desk POS reconciliation. So those training pieces can be removed. You want it to be specific to the new employee so it's not confusing. And again, they have an understanding of what they're expected to learn at the end of the training period. At Active, a fun way that we introduce employees to the company is we give them what we call an Active Passport. It's just a supplemental little booklet that they use. It has tasks for the new employee to complete as part of their training. It's on the checklist as something that needs to be completed. And there's a goal to complete it within the first 30 days of employment. This can fluctuate based off the amount of time an employee actually works and how many hours they work, but generally 30 days is appropriate for all new employees. So the Passport tasks include things like a core value review, safety training to-dos, meetings with key site leaders and coworkers, meetings with members, taking classes, participating in a fitness assessment, among other things that are going to help integrate them into the club and make them feel more comfortable. It's a great way to engage new employees and build relationships between the coworkers as well as with members. And once they complete it, the employee earns additional swag as that reward. And so they get integrated, they have fun doing it, they get a reward at the end, and it's a win-win.
Meredith, I love that idea, and I haven't heard of anyone doing that before. Just so I can get a visual in my head, does that passport, does it look like a passport? Is it like a little booklet where each of the tasks are on a different page? I mean, what does it physically look like?
Yeah, it looks like a passport, and the manager signs off, or whoever the person who it indicates who needs to sign off that they completed the task. So it's a really fun, cool little thing for new employees to use in order to get more involved and knowledgeable about the company and the club they're working in.
I love that initiative. Thank you for sharing that with us. So is there anything else that we need to know when it comes to a new employee's first day?
Absolutely. So after the training checklist has been reviewed and you've distributed the passport and the directives have been given out, the next step in first day training is always safety training. Now, this is typically for managers the most unfun part of the job, but it is so essential that employees are armed with the information they need in order to work safely from day one. So this also communicates to the employee that safety is the company's top priority. So there's no confusion. Active safety is not a backseat. It is a primary, right up in your face, constant that we have for all of our employees so that they understand that we're committed to them staying safe, to our members staying safe, and to have a healthy, fun, safe environment for everyone to work and work out in. So our safety training is really comprehensive. It covers safe work practices, job hazards that would be appropriate for a particular role. It talks about injury prevention. We go through the emergency response processes and procedures, reporting expectations in regards to incidents. In addition, new supervisors are trained on topics such as safety equipment maintenance, safety training delivery, hazard chemical program management, and workers' compensation procedures. These are all really important pieces for new employees to be comfortable with from the start. An employee could injure themselves on day one or day two. They need to know that they need to call our triage service and speak with a nurse and find out if they have to see a clinic. And then the workman's comp reporting. They need to know exactly what the expectation is because anything can happen at any time. And we want to make sure that they are prepared and know our expectations as an employer. New employees are also introduced to their on-demand resources at the same time. So all the information they get in regards to safety training, they can access that through documents on Active's intranet. We have videos on our training and development portal. We have completed internal videos that have care first, call first, single responder emergencies that are done in the club. So it can give them a visual understanding of what would be expected in the event of one of these emergencies and how that would actually look for them in one of our facilities. Multiple responders, we have a video for that. We have included videos on how to use our AEDs. It's one of those things that when you have a new employee, they may come from a different company or a different club that uses an entirely different AED. Even though the concept is the same, they need to know how to open it. They need to know how to unzip it. They need to know where to find it. They need to get comfortable with our tools that we have available. And we have videos on all of that, including an active shooter video that we have just rolled out. So policies and procedures are also detailed in our safety program manual. We have a hard copy on site. We also keep that on the intranet. These are all places that we have resources for our employees to access the information that they need in order to stay safe while working and support our members in the event of an emergency. So it's a lot. This makes for a pretty full first day. And if there's any time available after the safety training is completed, the manager is free to begin tackling additional tasks on the new employee training checklist. We don't see that very often because our training on the first day is so comprehensive. But it's a great way to get them introduced and touch on the things that are most important so that they can focus on being trained for their job moving forward.
I absolutely love that concept of the new employee orientation video. And that is something that I can imagine could be done so easily, just shot on like an iPhone or something very straightforward. But what a fantastic way to capture the culture and the energy of the business than to create a quick new employee orientation video. So thank you for sharing that idea with us. I think that a lot of people would be able to utilize that in their own business. So we have so far covered the pre-hire process, the hiring of employees, the new employee's first day, and the final part of today's session is new employee training. So, Meredith, when it comes to ensuring that your new employee has adequate training for their role, what are some of the things that we should consider?
Just like when I spoke earlier about managers rushing through interviews, oftentimes they rush through trainings and they provide abbreviated trainings and they throw their employees in far too quickly. And this isn't because managers don't care that their employees are trained. It's because they're hiring for urgency and they need to fill the spot and they need someone up and running very quickly. The problem is that this leads to poor performance and turnover. It doesn't lead to long-term employment. It doesn't lead to satisfied employees, and it doesn't lead to high performers. And so you will find yourself right back at square one, starting from the beginning. So we want to make sure that our managers are delivering a comprehensive training program that is appropriate for the role, that really onboards and gets employees up and trained as quickly as possible in all the ways that they need to in order to be successful. So the first step we ask managers to do is to make sure that they tailor the new employee training checklist appropriately so they know how much training will actually be needed for this particular new hire. Then we want them to, this will help them know the amount of time that they need in order to train each role so they can schedule the training accordingly. And I say schedule because you have to mark out this time or it won't happen. We would like these to be scheduled along with on-the-job training so they go together. A lot of times the checklist could be completed within 2 weeks. And this is typically with full-time employees who you're just busting out the training with because they're there many hours in the day. Part-time could take the full 90 days, depending on the number of hours the employee is scheduled. So you really want to make sure that you know exactly what they need to be trained on and how you're going to fit that into their regular schedule to make sure that they're hitting everything that they need to in order to be successful in the long term. So then the second step is to ensure that it is actually scheduled. Scheduling time for training provides a balance of that one-on-one training with on-the-job learning so that the training is well-rounded and you're not just spending time training someone and they're not actually getting any of the real live training that they need. So the goal obviously is to have all the training completed within 90 days and the employee is at full working status regardless of their position at the end of that time. The company's responsibility to new employees is to provide thorough, complete, and satisfactory training to the new hires to ensure their success in the role. So if the employer fails in meeting that responsibility, the employee will definitely struggle. So this is why training has to be structured and scheduled with one-on-one training balanced with on-the-job training. In addition to training, weekly check-ins are a must for that first 90 days. So these check-ins ideally would be scheduled. They would be a sit-down meeting, and you would discuss the weekly learnings and development of the new hire. You would define and adjust goals. You would review any hurdles the employee is experiencing so that you can help them overcome it quickly before it becomes a mountain. And then you would continue to build that relationship between the manager and the employee. So the amount of time that you will spend in these check-ins will vary and depend on the role. One may last 5 minutes, one may last 30 minutes, another one could last an hour. It really depends on the new hire and the role. So the important thing is that the check-in is impactful, that it's done with intention, that it's structured, and so it's productive. It has to be a successful check-in in order for it to make a difference within these first 90 days. At the end of the 90 days, the new employee should receive a 90-day review that assesses their performance thus far. So this review, it's meant to show appreciation for growth and contribution and give them a gauge of how far they've come. It's to set clear expectations for improvement. This is where you identify the small things that need to be improved so they don't become big things. You set goals moving forward. You want to make sure that they are also always working towards a specific goal. And then it's also to provide a baseline for future performance management. It may be needed if the performance becomes an issue. You want to have documentation that this is something that you have been coaching the employee on. So the 90-day review is an important employment milestone, and it needs to be used to officially transition those new employees out of their training period and into full-time working status.
Meredith, you have delivered such an immense amount of value for us today, and I want to thank you so much because each of those areas that you have just stepped us through were incredibly comprehensive, and I want to take this opportunity to remind everyone, because there was so much information that we've just covered, that what you can do right now is you can actually jump over to fitnessbusinesspodcast.com, click on the link for today's show notes, and in there you're going to find an ebook. And the ebook will break down each of these sections that Meredith has just talked us through. And you'll be able to actually not only listen to the interview as you've just done, but you can also read all of these sections, because I think that, it's so important that we get each of these things right. And you've just taken us through a tried and proven method of what works. And I think this has been such a wonderful demonstration of how we really can properly onboard a new employee in the first 90 days that they're with our company. So to finish off with today, Meredith, are there any last messages that you want to leave with everyone for today?
I really think that the key is to just take your time. You don't have to move slowly on purpose, but you do want to make sure that you are very intentional about your recruiting strategy. You want to make sure that when you are reviewing candidates and their applications, that you are very clear of what the job needs and that you're selecting to interview candidates that you truly feel are going to be a good fit for the company at first glance. Making sure you don't skip steps when it comes to the interview process and the reference checks. I think it's somewhere that it's easy to do because we hire out of urgency, and I encourage you to slow down and take your time so that you do choose the right candidate that will be a long-term employee, because you don't want to find yourself back here in 3 to 6 months looking to fill the same position. And then again, making sure that your offer letters, your compensation plans are reviewed by a legal representative to make sure that you're protecting your organization. That's very, very key. Offer letters and compensation plans can be a big area of concern if these are not tight when you send these to your applicants. And then making sure you take the time to fully train your employees and make sure that they have every tool that they need in order to be successful. I always say that when we hire people, they don't always turn out to be great hires, but I think if you've done your due diligence, you've done everything that you could possibly do to vet the person, and you feel in your gut that this person could be a really good fit and be successful and do well, then at the end of the day, there's not much more you can do than that. You can't beat yourself up for a bad hire. But if you've shortcutted, you didn't do proper training, you didn't vet the person properly, there's really no one else to blame but yourself. So in order to really do a great job and find the best people, it is a process. It's a long process, but it's one that's worth it.
Meredith, on behalf of everyone that is listening right now, I just want to say a huge thank you. You have provided us with tremendous value today and fantastic insights, and you have been extremely generous with your information. So thank you so much for joining us. And finally, we got you on the Fitness Business Podcast, and I am just thrilled. Yay. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Another huge thank you to Meredith. I have included links to the Active Wellness website in today's show notes so you can reach out to Meredith to chat further. There is also someone else I want to thank, and that is our intensive show partner, ABC Financial. ABC Financial leads the health and fitness industry in software and payment processing solutions. If you want your business to thrive with the most advanced club management software, comprehensive payment processing, and customer service that is second to none, then choose ABC Financial. You can request a demo at www.abcfinancial.com. Now, don't forget, in addition to the podcast, you can also download an ebook of today's intensive show. Just go to fitnessbusinesspodcast.com, click on the link at the top of the page called Intensive, then scroll down and press the button that says access the ebook of this interview. It is that easy. Thank you all for joining me for this special edition of the ABC Financial Intensive Shows on the first 90 days onboarding a new employee. This is our last intensive for 2018, but don't forget we have a huge library of shows. You can check out retention, sales, financial management, how to start your own YouTube channel, video essentials, and how to start your online personal training business. All of those shows, along with their ebooks, are all located at fitnessbusinesspodcast.com. Head over to the website and then click on the intensive tab. As always, I would love to hear what you thought of this latest show. Please email me at any time at chantal@fitnessbusinesspodcast.com. Until next time, what you leave behind is not what's engraved in stone monuments, but what is woven into the lives of others.